Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to have you all here for tonight's Cybersecurity Roundtable. City of Sault Ste. Marie is hosting the event, but Central Savings Bank is gathering this group of people together for a presentation by Andrew Gale, and he is from LASCO, and he will be guiding us through different things, tips and tricks for phishing and beyond. Thank you for coming. Andrew.
Thanks. All right. All right. Good evening, everybody. As she said, we're going to be covering, and I'm trying to watch both directions, tips and tricks, talking about some business compromise stuff, talking about password security, and then just going through some general cybersecurity information. So to get started, a little bit about LASCO. Next up will be why you should care. Why is cybersecurity important to you? Then we'll be talking about business compromise, both via email, voice, texting, so on and so forth. We're going to be talking about how to adapt security, how it's important to you, how can you transform your organization to be cybersecure aware, what that kind of training looks like for your organization. Then we're going to get a little technical. We're going to talk about defense in depth, which is layered security for your organization. And then lastly, we are going to talk about password security and why that's important. So a little bit about LASCO. We've been in business for over 56 years. Our primary customers are obviously banks that we work with. We have a whole lot of commercial relationships as well. We've been doing IT for a very long time. A lot of our customers have been with us for 30, 35, 40 years. And we're not this typical cookie cutter type organization. We have flexible pricing models. We work with our customers to help them with what they need help with, and not necessarily pushing services and stuff. As was said, we have expertise in financial institutions, health organizations, attorneys, government entities, manufacturings, and we also do a lot of work with various nonprofit organizations as well. Our vision at LASCO, we're going to craft solutions that work for you. We have your expectations, your best interest at heart. We focus on the things that can help transform your organization, make it more cybersecure, as also leverage technology to ensure you have the best possible results that work for you. So let's get into cybersecurity. So when we talk about cybersecurity, one of the fundamental principles of cybersecurity is what we call the CIA triad. And this doesn't refer to the governmental organization. This refers to 3 layers that we always focus on within cybersecurity. The foundation of that layer, everybody knows, is confidentiality. And what that essentially means is you're wanting to make sure those that have access or should have access are the only ones that do. So we want to prevent those that shouldn't have access, whether it be bad actors, whether it be employees that don't need access to the payroll directory, so on and so forth. When we move up for that, we want to talk about integrity, and a lot of people forget this one. So even though you may have access, even though a bad actor may gain access, how do you know the data is accurate? So if you open an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document, how do you know that data has not been modified? So that's one of the things that we try to focus on with cybersecurity. And the last one is availability. And what I mean by that is when you need it most, when you're with a customer, you're doing something for somebody, you're sitting at your computer desk and you're working in office, whatever it may be, we want to ensure that that application, that data is available to you. As an IT person, we want to try to get what we call the 5 nines, and that is 99.999% of the time we want that data or that application available. I assure you that's nearly impossible to get to. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's something like 7 minutes a year or something downtime. But that's what we're striving for. So, give you a little scary statistics to start off with. This is why you should care. We have some numbers up here. This is reported by IBM. The average breach time from identification of that breach to the time that it is resolved is nearly a year. So imagine how much damage a bad actor, malicious entity could do within a year's time, either without you even knowing it or until you can get it resolved. When we talk about malicious insiders, whether it's accidental or somebody within your organization, the average time to resolution is 308 days. Imagine how much damage they can do. So, global cybercrime. So this is out 2021. They haven't come quite out with the numbers for 2022 yet. We should have those actually within this month. They usually come out in Cybersecurity Month. The average is $16.4 billion a day. That's how much damage is done from a cybersecurity standpoint. That equates to $190,000 every second. And that's factoring in breaches, fines, ransomware, all those different aspects. So some might say, why is this important to me? We're a small business. Nobody's ever going to attack us. It's all random anyways, whatever it may be. And those statistics do not hold up. So you take a company like, JP Morgan, they have $100 million IT budget, and obviously they have a large array of different techniques and tools that they have that they're using to prevent these kinds of things from happening. Well, it happened back in 2014 because a gentleman opened up an email he wasn't supposed to, and they gained access. Why are they focusing on the small businesses? Well, you don't have a $100 million IT budget. It's much easier to gain access. You don't have the high-level intrusion techniques. You don't have the high-level programs that are going to help prevent these kinds of other things. You don't have the manpower to do these kind of things. Yes, the windfall they're going to grab, whether it be personal identifiable information, whether it be financial records, are not going to be as great, but it's much easier to get into. So, a couple more numbers before we start getting into things. Average total cost of breach by industry. Obviously, our regulated industries have the highest cost per breach, that being healthcare and financial, i.e. banks. But you can see that the average cost by data breach is astronomical. If you were to get breached, if they were to get PII, it could potentially ruin a small company. I mean, we're talking millions. On the right-hand side, we have the number of CVEs. And what these are the number of identified vulnerabilities by year. So these are your exploitable vulnerabilities that are released out to the bad actors. This year is on pace to surpass 2022, as long as the numbers continue, and will be out over 25,000 vulnerabilities this year. And those are just exploitable, remote executable vulnerabilities. We're not talking every vulnerability in existence. We're talking about ones that are being actively exploited. That number is astronomical. So, where do we go for it? And I like to add a little humor to my presentation, so I apologize. We are not the big guy on the left. We're the guy on the right, working against the bad actors. So, let's talk about a little bit about business compromise. So, business compromise is really a generic term. It can range from a whole bunch of different things. I'm going to talk about the three probably biggest, which is what we call the ishings. We have phishing, smishing, vishing, and that stands for email. Smishing is your SMS texting, or you putting on your, texting to your phone, whether it be on an iPhone or an Android device. And then vishing is voice phishing. So what can we do to help prevent some of these kinds of things? I will tell you this, that email is the biggest vector for any breach. There are statistics, and you can argue statistics back and forth, but there are statistics that 90% of all breaches occur over email. So we need to be extra careful when we talk about email. What can you do to help prevent these kinds of things? One of the biggest things is we look for telltale signs in the email itself. You look for the broken English, you look for the grammatical issues or punctuation issues. Most of our phishing emails, our spam emails, come from overseas. They are not people that usually are very fluent in the English language. Now, I will say this, we've all heard about AI. You've probably heard about, ChatGPT or some of these things that are being incorporated into browsers, the Edge browser and the Chrome browser, stuff like that. That is changing that game. So instead of having to type the email themselves, now all they're doing is saying, hey, write me an email about this, and it's writing them an email with perfect English. So that is changing that game a little bit. The other things, there are some other telltale signs you can really focus on. One is the to and the from fields. Oftentimes we look at an email and we see from, and it may say, Andrew Gale, and then in little parentheses next to it, it says, blah, blah, blah at gmail.com. Well, I know that's not my email address. So those are the kinds of things we have to pay attention to. The other thing is, if it's addressed to you and 97 people you don't know, more than likely it's not a legitimate email. So you have to pay attention to those kinds of things. The other big thing is when it was sent. If it looks like an email that you normally receive from a client, and maybe it looks like it's legitimate, but it was sent at 2:30 in the morning on Sunday, those are the kinds of things we should be questioning. If, just like when we go to the store and, nobody ever asks to verify your signature on the credit card, but they do, you're excited about it. You're like, oh, that's great. You should be doing the same kinds of things if you have any doubt in your mind. If that doubt is 1%, I am not sure this email is legitimate, pick up the phone, call them and say, hey, just got an email from you. I'm not quite sure if this is safe. Is this you sending me this email? Verify it with the person. If the email has any kind of negative or exciting consequences, you just won the Jamaican lottery, send your account information and they'll wire transfer you the money. I assure you, you don't have an uncle in Kenya that just, passed away and he wants to give you money. Those kinds of things don't happen. The other big thing is we always recommend, or we always focus on links in the email, or if it has attachments. That is usually how they get you. They want you to click on a link. They want to scare you into clicking something. They want to get you excited and click on something, or they have an attachment to the email. You should always question any email that has a link or an attachment. Number one, question it. If you use Outlook or any other kind of web browser typed email, you can hover over the link and it will tell you where it's taking you to. Just because it says www.yahoo.com, that doesn't mean that's where it's taking it to you. If you hover over it, it will tell you where it's taking you. You should always verify. So smishing. Smishing is what we call SMS texting. So this is very hard because it's generally untraceable. Usually it's going to come to you just like you receive, text messages from your credit card or, some business where it's coming from some 5-digit code. They utilize those. Just because it's coming from a number you recognize, how many people are getting calls and it looks like it's coming from a 906 area code and they're not calling from a 906 area code because, hey, we want to talk to you about your extended car warranty. It is very easy to spoof those numbers. So don't ever trust the number for both vishing and smishing. Don't ever trust the number it's coming from. Again, they're trying to get you with links. They want you to get you excited. There was a big scam that happened in Britain and is still going on right now where they got a hold of information from a bank and they're sending out messages to all their SMS messages to all their customers trying to get them to click a link saying that their account has been compromised. You need to verify information. You log into this website. You log into their website. It's not the company's website. It looks like it, but now they have the username and password and they can get into your bank account information. Again, they focus on the negative consequences, the exciting information. They want you to get you to click that link. Phishing, which is voice phishing. They are going to try to get you to feel comfortable on the phone. This is what we call social engineering. They're going to be name dropping. Maybe they looked at your website and saw that, hey, you also work with Andrew Gale. I'm going to start dropping his name, trying to get you to comfortable. Or maybe they sent you an email prior to, and it's a spam email, said, hey, I'm going to be calling you tomorrow, talk about the subject. You feel a little bit more comfortable about it. We call that pretexting. All these kinds of things, they want you to get comfortable so that you give them information. The general rule of thumb, because you can't trust the number that's on the phone, is if somebody calls you and they want you to verify any information, and I'm going to go really deep here. I don't care what it is. Your name, your business name, your address, anything. Hang up the phone, call them back at your recorded customer service numbers for that business. Don't ever verify anything over the phone if they call you, unless you're 100% positive. So, what can you do as a business overall to help in a cybersecurity environment? One, this is a top-down approach. Leadership has to commit. They have to understand that we are going to focus on cybersecurity throughout every aspect of the business. In today's age where IT is in every aspect, from operations to everything, we have to focus on cybersecurity. I apologize. 2, we have to train our employees. Employees, this is going to sound horrible, are the biggest vulnerability in any organization. I don't care how much money you spend in IT systems, how secure you are. We look at the JP Morgan's breach. It did occur 9 years ago. They were breached because the person opened any email they shouldn't. So it doesn't matter how much money you put into it, you have to train your employees. They have to be on board with that cybersecurity environment. 3, you have to have clean policies and procedures. These have to be clear to your employees. They have to understand it, and the leadership has to commit to those. Everybody should be aware of them. It should be part of your employee handbook. However you present those policies and procedures to employees, cybersecurity should be integrated into that in every aspect. And then 4th, just because you have those policies and procedures, or you have certain things in place, or you have systems in place, you need to assess them. Are they working properly? Are they doing what we want it to do? Test those security practices. So, on the training aspect, who do we train? Who is important to be trained? This needs to be all the way from the top down. You're training your board of directors, you're training your president, you're training all your managers, supervisors, and directors, all employees. You have to focus on everybody. Anybody who utilizes systems or has access to systems or even represents your company, you want to make sure they have similar training. Because it breaches even things that may just get into the media. They may not even breached, but something happens, for example, a board of directors, and something happens and that gets into the media or gets leaked, that can be a negative impact on your company. So you have to train everybody from the top down. Secondly, be creative. You don't have to do the same thing over and over again. It doesn't have to be, hey, I'm going to go through a 45-minute, spiel on cybersecurity, or hey, we're going to have Andrew come in and talk to us every year. Do something different. Make it fun. Do games. Do training exercises. Tabletop tests are a great way to talk to your employees, where you put a scenario. Hey, this system went down. What are you guys going to do for the next 8 hours until it's back up? Those kind of scenarios help. They create a cybersecurity involvement. It gets employees involved and makes them feel part of the process. Elevate your security culture. How do you do this? You can create incentive programs, first person to get their training done, or, first department that gets all their people trained, whatever it may be, make it part of your organization. Get your employees involved. So let's talk a little bit technical here, and I apologize. I just wanted to throw in some things that are really being focused on in the industry today that, cyber insurance has been focusing on. If you're in a company that's regulated by the federal government or state governments, these are really the things that they're focusing on. One, you've probably heard this 1,000 times. If you came to me and said, Andrew, what is the number one thing you could recommend for us to do that would help secure our organization? I would tell you multi-factor authentication, without a doubt. What is multi-factor authentication? Multi-factor authentication is that you go to log into an application, your computer, a website, whatever it may be, and then it wants to send a code to your phone or send you a secure email that you have to view a code, or wherever that is, it's sending you some additional form of security outside of their password, so that if somebody gets your username and password, they can't get into your account. Implement it everywhere. Anywhere that has the ability to do multi-factor authentication, you want to implement it. Because if somebody does get access to a computer, does get your username and password, and even if you're using that username and password across multiple accounts, which by the way is a big no-no, and we'll get to that here in a bit, if there's multi-factor authentication, they can't get in. So it's very, very important to implement. 2, if you are a business, implement a SIEM. And if you don't know what a SIEM is, it stands for Security Information Event Management. So it's a centralized repository that all these different logs and alerts come into that give you knowledge into what's happening in your organization. You can't fix things, you can't know about things, you can't help prevent things unless you're aware of it. And this is that method to do that. So, we talk about somebody trying to brute force a password where they're throwing thousands of passwords at an account every millisecond. You can see those kinds of things. Or if some account's constantly getting locked out, or We see malicious new applications being installed on a computer. This is where all that data comes into. The most obvious three, and I threw these on here, if you're not doing these, you should be doing these already: patching, backups, antivirus. So patching means, Windows, all these different operating systems, applications, they all have vulnerabilities that come up. Patching is what fixes those vulnerabilities on a regular basis. 2, backups. Why is this important? Ransomware. So if you do get ransomed, whether you're at home and you have all your pictures stored on your computer and you get ransomware and it encrypts all those pictures, how are you going to get them back? You're going to pay the $10,000 for the ransom? How do you know they're not going to up it to $20,000? Same thing for a business. The only way to beat ransomware, and I'm going to say this, there's some of the ransomwares have been cracked, but it's very hard to do and very limited. Either you pay the ransom or you restore from backup. It's the only way. So backup's very important. Antivirus, those are your first lines of defense, obviously against malicious actors trying to get in, malicious software being installed, etc. And then lastly, this has become a huge thing over the past 5 years or so. If you don't already have cyber insurance, you should. So the question is if you do get breached, what next? We look at, and I'm going to use a big example, the Target breach that happened many, many years ago. You know how much they spent in that breach? I think this something was like $160 some million, somewhere around there. That was after cyber insurance. The total was close to $300 million before cyber insurance. So imagine tens of thousands or even millions of dollars that are levied against your organization, whether it be to bring in third parties, because your IT people can't be involved, whether it's fines from the federal or state governments, whether it's reputational degradation, whatever it may be, those kinds of things will be astronomical. What else? What else can we be looking at? So 1, control public information. What do I mean by this? We're talking about open source intelligence. So it is very, very easy to do to go out there and get lots of information on an organization just from doing searches or web crawls. You have on your website your staff, you have email addresses, you have phone numbers, you have your address, you have people who have open Facebook accounts where they're not blocking people. They look at LinkedIn and start looking for people that work in an organization that have, that have them working at that. There's lots of information they can get and use very, very quickly for what we call spear phishing attempts. So phishing is usually random. Spear phishing is usually specifically directed at your organization. So control that information. What's out there, what they have access to. The less you can put out there, the better. The other big thing that a lot of people don't know about, who here knows about the Wayback Machine? Besides Ben, because I already know he's going to raise his hand. Anybody ever heard of this before? So the Wayback Machine is what we call web crawlers. And web crawlers, they have an organization that web crawls the entire internet, and it stores everything. So if you go out there, and let's say you put up a new website, and you have everybody email addresses out there, and then 3 days later you come to Andrew's presentation and you decide you're going to remove it all because you don't want it out there anymore. If they already web crawled your website, it is now in the Wayback Machine. And it will be there forever unless you specifically contact them and say, hey, please remove this. So this is where a lot of people get information, like they post stupid stuff on Twitter and then they delete it and people still have access to it. This is where they're getting it from, because it records everything. Filtering, and we're not going to get into all these various topics. We can talk, if anybody has questions, I can talk later. You should have email filtering. This is what's going to prevent all those spams or phishing email coming in. It's not 100% perfect, but it is insurance policy. Web filtering is where we're preventing users from going outside to specific websites. We obviously don't want to allow them access to things they shouldn't be. And even if it's not malicious, it could be accidental. So, you could try to go out to google.com and they forget an O, and I'm not saying it is, but that website might be malicious. So you're helping prevent those kinds of things. We talked a little bit about it earlier, testing. You should be testing your systems you have in place. You should be looking at the various things, making sure that, hey, we just patched this system. Did it really? How do you know? Also testing what you have put in place as far as your security procedures. You know, if I have this as my employee manual, how do I know people are actually following that? Accounts. So we have the administrator account, which actually obviously has access to everything on a computer. Should your normal users every day have access to that? As a bad actor, the first thing I'm going to try to do once I get access to a machine is I'm going to try to do what's called privilege escalation. I want to get an administrator account, because with an administrator account, I can do everything on that machine if I want to, whether it's looking at passwords, resetting passwords, gaining access, installing applications, whatever it may be. The next thing I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to start getting access to other machines. We call it lateral movement. I'm going to try to start getting access to other machines, whether it be a server, whether it be your Active Directory server that houses passwords for everybody. I'm going to try to do that. So removing that administrator account is probably one of the best things you can do. When we start talking beyond that, and I won't get into all of these, we start talking about intrusion detection and intrusion prevention, where I'm preventing people, I'm looking at all the traffic, and we talk about data, that ones and zeros coming in, and I'm matching it up to signatures saying, hey, could this be possibly malicious? We talk about network segmentation, where I'm saying, hey, my printers are on a different subnet than my PCs or my security systems. We talk about application control, where we're saying only certain applications can run on a desktop. We talk about network access control, where I'm saying that if I don't recognize this machine on my network, shut it down. And lastly, we talk about redirection. This has become very big in the industry today. We talk about honeypots. So what a honeypot is I'm putting false data out there, or maybe creating a false account on a system, and if anything tags it, if anything looks at it, I'm immediately notifying your IT administrator saying, hey, people are looking at this. There's something going on here, because nobody would ever access it unless they're malicious. So one of the last few subjects, password security. This is huge. So in today's industry, most people consider 8-character passwords is pretty much the standard nowadays. I mean, it's slowly changing, but that's pretty much been the standard for the last 10 years or so. With AI coming on board, because it can help even increase the amount of how they brute force attack your passwords. Complex password, so we're talking about uppercase, lowercase, special character, numeral. 3 of those 4 is considered a complex password. 8-character password can be broken in 1 second. That is not secure. The recommendation now is 12 to 14 characters. As you can see, 12-character password would take 8 months. 14-character password would take 3,000 years. Now, that is changing very rapidly. When we start talking about quantum computing, which is coming very fast, that could change very rapidly. That 14-character password could be down to 1 second very, very soon. So what else can we do? Account lockout policy. That is I only can throw in 3 passwords every 30 minutes before it locks my account. When I take that 8-character password and throw in account lockout policy, it jumps to like a quadrillion years. Because now instead of dumping tens of thousands of passwords every second, I only can dump 3 passwords every 30 minutes. So when we talk about passwords, what should they look like? This is one of my favorite slides, by the way. Spaceballs is a good movie. By the way, 12345 is not a secure password. So what should the password look like? We talked about 12 to 14 characters. High profile accounts, we just talked about those. Those are your administrator accounts, should be anywhere from 16 to 21 characters. You want to prevent them from gaining access to those administrator accounts. Once they do, it is very tough. They're going to have access to a lot of data. They should be complex. We talk about mixed casing and special characters. They should meet uppercase, lowercase, special character number. They should have all 3 of those, all 4 of those every time. This is the one everybody hates. Every account you have, should you have a unique password, period. If they gain access to one account, you don't want them gaining access to everything. I assure you, if somebody has a username and password for you, they're going to be able to find where you may have access to, or they're going to be logging in with various websites. So let's say they gain access to some website. They're going to be trying that same username and password for a lot of other websites. So they gain access to your Facebook. That seems to be a common thing nowadays. They're going to be trying it on LinkedIn. They're going to be trying it on Tinder. They're going to be trying it on X or whatever the heck the new name is, whatever it is, they're going to be trying it everywhere. So you want to try to use a unique password as much as possible. Your passwords need to be uncommon. What do we mean by that? They need to be a jumble of letters, either generated through a password manager app. Big thing they're talking about today is what we call passphrases. So you take a common sentence, like we take the name of the side, key policy, the power of a strong password. So my new password becomes KP:TPOASP. Throw some numbers at the bottom, throw in a special character, whatever. Use passphrases. It's easy to remember, and it's something that can make a big jumble of letters. Big thing that's coming, we'll see how it phrases out, is what we call passkeys. You probably may have heard about in the news. Can be stored in a password manager. They throw multi-factor authentication and passwords together, but those are still on their horizon a little bit. And lastly, IT documentation. This is what we sort of talked about through the entire presentation. Just because you say something doesn't mean you do something. And this is where the IT documentation really comes in. You need to have it documented. You need to have it assessed. And you should have cyber laced throughout all of those documents, whether it be your employee handbook, whether you have a security program, whether you have some kind of disaster recovery plan. Cybersecurity should be part of that. They should be reviewed at least on a quarterly basis, annuals for some of them, but that cybersecurity should be laced out through all of them. The other big thing is standards and hardening. And I wanted to focus on this just a little bit. What do we mean by this? You could call them baselines. So if I set up a new system, let's say, I'm an organization of 20 people and I have this new PC come in, I want to make sure that that PC has the same standards on it, whether it be disabling things, changing the administrator password, or whatever it may be. I want to make sure that is done consistently every time, whether it be patching it. We look at the Experian breach that happened. That was because somebody forgot to patch, what was it, a web server, Bren? I think it was a web server that got patched. We want to make sure those things happen every time. And that's where standards, hardening, and IT documentation come in. We want to make sure those kinds of things don't get left behind. People don't make mistakes. That's all I had. Any questions before we move on to Andrea? Yes, ma'am.
I do accounts payable for the cities.
Yep.
We're all paperless, so all of my invoices come in through my email.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get a new vendor that I might not be familiar with, that somebody, one of the employees has contracted with, how do I know that email is legit? Like, I haven't had any yet, but do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
sometimes it's a link to an invoice, sometimes it's a PDF of an invoice, sometimes it's an Excel or a Word document,
So there's numerous things. So for people that didn't hear the question, she does accounts payroll and accounts invoicing and for the city. She's wondering if she has a new vendor. How does she know that email is legitimate? So that's a very hard question to answer. So it's really comes to a variety of factors. One, I hate to say it, but every email that comes to you, you should automatically view it as suspicious, because you're so dealing with the public, because you have random people sending you stuff. You really need to be viewing every email as, okay, let me verify this information first before I do anything. So we talked about some of the things we talked about. You should be looking at the to, is it just to you? You should be looking at the froms, is it to you? And is there anybody else included on it? Verify that, that says the name and then it has the email address next to it. Do those match? Does it look like an email from that organization? If there's any question on that from the start, have your IT verify it. They can look at what we call the header information for that email, and they can look, hey, it may say it's coming from bobsauto.com. Is it really coming from there? Second of all, obviously we talked about, if there's any exciting or, hey, if you don't, this is a past due invoice, that should immediately raise red flags. Call them if you have any questions. Number two, we get back to vendor management. I don't know how, you work with invoices for the city, but, if this is somebody you've not necessarily dealt with before, they're new, they haven't contacted you, has this already gone through the standard cities processes of looking at this vendor and making sure they're a legitimate vendor, that, hey, should they be even sending you an invoice? Third, what's in the email? What's the subject line? Does the subject even match something that you would necessarily see? Fourth, is if it's a link, do you use Outlook? We have this tip and trick called hover and discover. Hover over the link, if it says it's taking you out to bobsauto.com/invoices, is it really taking you there? And if you still have any doubts, call them. Unfortunately, you're in a position where you're between a rock and a hard place that you're going to have to be very careful, because you're in a position where you can't get out of that. And two, you're just going to have to make sure that you're being very cautious in what you do, unfortunately. Hopefully the city has systems like spam filtering and things like that in place that's going to help make that a lot easier for you, so that, so a lot of spam systems work on what we call a scoring system. So if the email comes in and it doesn't match the domain, or it has certain flags to it, or it has a link, it rates it a score. And if it gets above that score, it automatically puts it to quarantine. I'm assuming the city has systems like that, and that's going to be very helpful to you, but you're still going to have to be very cautious in what you look at and making sure that every email is legitimate, especially if it's a new company.
I think with new vendors, we should probably have the department that's purchasing the new vendor item to let accounts payable know, hey, this is coming.
Yep.
Working with a new vendor you don't have, because she has follow-up to do anyway. She's got to get
Yep.
information, she's got to, and to confirm with the person doing the purchase is probably a best. And I think we do that to some extent, but sometimes they come into that serious, don't they?
Well, yeah, then that's what we're referring to when we mean vendor management, is that kind of information should be passed throughout the organization, and making sure that, it's flowing to the right people, so there are no questions in that regard. If a new vendor is used and they're purchased and their domain is, I'm a stupid example again, bobsauto.com, and all of a sudden she's receiving an email and it's from, Bob's and Dave's bobcat.com, and she's like, oh, well, maybe that's the company they were talking about. Those kinds of things can be prevented by disseminating that information throughout. Any other questions before I turn it over to Andrea? Yes, ma'am.
What do you recommend for saving passwords? When you're talking about generating a password,
Yep.
I'm never going to remember that.
So
And
there,
you have so many passwords, how do you keep all those secure?
So the question was, what do I recommend for saving passwords? Obviously, I spoke about unique passwords, and we all know we have 800 accounts that we have to remember. And how are you going to remember a 14-character password that's unique for every password? Big thing is password managers. So if you're not familiar with what a password manager is, it's a encrypted database that stores your passwords. You remember a master password, so one password to get in, and then you have access to those passwords. Now, are they the end-all be-all solution? No, and that's where pass keys and stuff like that are coming from, but they're a lot more secure. I would rather you have to remember one password and you make it very long to get in, and then you store all your passwords as part of this password manager. And a lot of times you can actually create the links in the password manager. You click on them, it'll take you out and log in for you. I would rather you do that, have passwords that are 14, 16, 18, 24 characters long, and have them all unique, than have some of the downsides and the cons of a password manager. If you haven't heard, one of the big ones, LastPass, was breached, 2 years ago, again last year. Now, usually, if I were to go to LastPass and say, hey, I forgot my master password, their response to you would be start over. They don't have access to it. However, in the last breach that happened with LastPass, they gained access through one of the IT folks to the databases and started pulling databases and stuff, and were able to crack some passwords. As I said, it's not the end-all be-all solution, but that would be the ideal solution, because it's going to make you much more secure than using, a single password throughout.
So can you use that through your work computer and phone and home?
Yeah, a lot of them you can do. That does push you to a cloud-based type password system, but a lot of them do allow you to do that. So you can use it at work. You can do it on your phone. Like I use one called 1Password, and I have it on both my personal computer at home and my phone as well, and I use it to log into websites. Now, I would never recommend that you use one application like that for all of it. I would recommend you keep work separately from your personal, but you still would have access to and from various systems if you wanted to. Yeah.
So you recommended the two-party authentication, and I know for some websites, it works very well for me. I don't have a problem typing in that number or having it call me or whatever.
Yep.
because we could set that up for some of our different banking websites if they have it. And so maybe-
Unfortunately, no. There isn't really any rhyme or reason, I guess, per se, for those that have it and that those that don't. I would say that it should be part of your vendor due diligence. You know, when you're setting up a new vendor or you're, you know, working with a company, one of the first questions you should ask them is, hey, you know, how am I going to be gaining access to this information? And when they say, oh, we have a third party or a login website you can get to, one of the questions you should be asking them is, do you guys do multi-factor authentication? That should be part of that, so that you can, you know, look at them and say, hey, if they're not keeping our data secure, do we want to be doing business with them? So unfortunately, you know, there's not a real rhyme or reason. Obviously, your bigger companies have that kind of thing. Ben's throwing me information. But, you know, and even if you have existing customers, I would recommend asking them. You know, you may have a company you work with, or a third-party banking website or a credit card or something, and you may not have it on there. Ask them. Say, hey, do you guys have any multi-factor authentication? How are you making sure my data is secure? A lot of other things that banks and financial institutions and third credit cards, or if you have companies that specifically work with, like, you know, governmental agencies, they do what's called whitelisting. And what a whitelisting is I don't want Vladimir Putin from being able to try to brute force attack my password for Capital One. I'm using a stupid example because I don't do whitelisting, but CapitalOne.com. You know, I'm going to say, hey, the only people that can log into this website come from specific organizations, and I can do that. And I won't get into the details how they do that, but that's what the kinds of things you're looking for. You want to make sure that they're protecting your data. Most of the major financial institutions are doing that. You can have some kinds. So I'm way over my time. I apologize to me. So we're going to switch it over. And then if you have any other questions, I'll be in the back. I'll be standing outside. Feel free to ask me whatever you need. So let me just get the presentation up. Next we have up, oh, I already forgot your last name. Yeah, I do her first name. I couldn't remember the last name. We have Andrea Rice from Central Savings Bank, who's going to talk about scam awareness and how to protect your business. So, Andrea?
Good evening, everyone. I am the BSA Bank Security Act Anti-Money Laundering Officer at Central Savings Bank. So that means I deal with the fraud, the illicit money going in or out of the bank. So I have a lot of information about what we're seeing locally, what we see through the industry in Michigan, and hopefully I can help you guys answer some of those questions. I've been in this department since 2020. And I've been with banks since 2019. So one of the things unfortunately, businesses of all sizes are seeing fraud, and several different kinds of fraud, not just cybersecurity. So I'm going to go beyond cybersecurity because I know nothing about cybersecurity. If they asked me to do that, I would have said no. I did. I was learning with you guys. So if they put me in that department, I would cry, and Connie would cry, and everybody would cry for a while because it wouldn't be good. So some of the frauds that we're seeing and the different types of scams, we're seeing it in checks, we're seeing it in wires and ACHs, identity theft for businesses, the fake invoices and payment requests. We'll talk a little bit about that, and people requesting overpayment and then you issuing refunds and losing your money that way. So we'll talk about how to prevent a little of this, some common general controls, and we're going to talk about scam tactics a little later, and then we'll hit on like 5 of those in depth. So preventing your business from being scammed is really about training. I know that LASCO touched on that, and that is really where it is. It's training and communication. That's 100% what is going to resolve a lot of these issues. So things that you should know and research yourself even and listen to the news is, what's the most common scams out there right now? What are they and how do they work? you and your employees should be developing procedures around them. How do you bring in new relationship for your businesses? We were talking about the vendors. You guys should have a process around that, a checklist stating, hey, and of course, accounts payable should be notified, hey, this vendor is going to be doing, going to be coming in with us. So it shouldn't be just vendors, it should be clients and employees also. Bringing in new employees, that's hard right now, isn't it? Staffing, it's a huge issue everywhere. So training them, but getting the right people in the door, checking their references, doing background checks, doing all that. Because if you get the wrong person in there, there's a lot of ways that they can move money in their business, and in your business, out of your business, and they probably know better than you do how to do it. So making sure you're vetting those people. People need to know when somebody calls them, what can I share with people? People are getting information from your business. They're trained to pull information out of you. So making sure that you are not answering questions if you don't know who it is. It's okay to say, I'm really busy right now. I have customers in front of me. Can I give you a call back? And then verify that's who you were talking to. Hey, Andrea from Central Savings Bank. I know Connie. I can call Connie and see if Andrea should really be calling me and asking me these questions. Is this something that she would do? Is this information that I should give? So, and then what do you do if your business is a victim of fraud? Getting a hold of having your contacts in place, letting people know right away, your bank, if your bank account has been compromised, if you've given out information, getting a list together and saying, hey, this is what we need to do if it happens. So, other best practices are keeping good records. We're always in such a hurry, and we have 1 million passwords, and we have 1 million spreadsheets, and we have paper in front of us and all this stuff. So keeping that organized and having a system for looking back on it when you need to, just in case you get that false invoice that you don't need to pay. That way you can refer back and say, wait, that doesn't make any sense. I know we didn't pay them like that before, and going back and looking what you did before. Creating payment procedures with dual control. If she gets all of the bills by email, a good thing would be to have somebody else send them to, hey, Andrea just got a bill from Lasco, and just trying to think of vendors, and I don't know anything about Lasco. I don't know what bills we should be paying. I don't know if they really perform that service. So that should not go necessarily to accounts receivable. That should go to Connie or Ellen or somebody in the IT department who knows that information for approval, and then it go to the proper department to get it paid. So there should be some procedures in place for that. We did have a business get hit with this. Somebody called up to the business and said, hey, we're not gonna get paid like that anymore. We wanna get paid like this. Here's our new account numbers. Here's where you need to send the payment. Here's where you send the check. Here's where you send the ACH. This one happened to be an ACH. The person who took the phone call was in the office. They were in a hurry, did what they said. They paid a bill to somebody. They paid a true bill, but it didn't go to the right place. So making sure that when you take that information, somebody gives you that call, you say, okay, and then you hang up and you use a number that you have on file. He alluded to that some, but if you use the email that they sent and you use the phone number's connection on that, you're gonna be calling the scammer. So if you're calling the scammer, they're gonna tell you to send it. So you want to go back, that's where keeping good records and looking back, think of the days of the old Rolodex, at least we have it all in a computer now, but we should use our records. If it's a new vendor, potentially searching that online. If nothing is matching up, then you need to go to whoever set up that vendor and say, who is your contact here? I need to talk to them and make sure I'm talking to the appropriate person. Does that kind of help some on some of the questions you had before? Staffing is huge. Maintaining that staffing and training that staffing. So We all like to go on vacation. I like to go on vacation. Who knows my job when I'm going on vacation? Who have you trained? And have you trained them all these things? Because that's a big opportunity for people to compromise your business, is when some critical person is not in place at the time. So making sure that everybody's familiar who's going to work in that area. And then using technology to verify payment methods for fraud often. I'm sure this isn't maybe a problem with some of the business ends in here, but smaller businesses, if you're out on the road and you're working construction and you're writing checks, making sure that what you put through is going through and that somebody else isn't putting things through that you didn't know was. That's essential part of doing it, not just verifying once a month. So scammers and their tactics. Of course, we don't know what a scammer looks like. They're all different. Everybody looks different. You know, they probably don't look like this person on my screen right now. Wouldn't that be nice? But they will try to gain your trust every time. And that's how they start it. And if they can work that, they'll work it. But once they can't work that, then they start different tactics. They have a sense of urgency. I need this now. Come on, we're going to shut this off, or we're going to call your boss. Somebody called the bank the other day, and somebody answered the phone and basically was told that, you know, we're going to call this person. And, you know, so then you get the fear, and then you just start reacting. So make sure you don't let anybody use that sense of urgency. Just back up and run your procedure. Don't fall for that part of it. And they ask for specific ways to pay. Of course, they're not going to ask bigger businesses to pay with gift cards, but wires is going to be wires and ACHs. They're going to move that money into an account, and then they're going to move it fast, and you're not going to be able to recover that. And so making sure, you know, if this is an odd way for you to pay a bill, but they're saying, oh, we got to have it now, do your research. Don't just fall for that. So when we talk about the different kind of scams that are really big right now, check fraud is huge. And so, of course, we all know they get your information, they intercept your mail, you provide a payment to somebody, they steal all your information. Data breaches is one way they could get all your information, and then they just start creating checks on the computer, or they alter the actual check. That's still being done. Even though we have all the cybersecurity, they're still using the old ways for fraud too. So one of the things you can do is positive pay. If you are a customer of our bank, we have a system called Positive Pay, and it matches your checks with the name, with the amount, with the check number. And if it doesn't match, we don't let it clear. So a lot of big businesses use it. It wouldn't be bad for small businesses to use it too, especially if you're on the road, especially if you can't verify your account every day. That lets us do it. That lets the computer and the bank take care of that for you. So using those tools that the bank has. One of the things, you watch the news, and don't take your mail and put it in those blue postal bins, or if you're a small business, maybe you take it out to your mailbox and put your flag up. They're stealing those. They're stealing that information from there. You should take anything with a check right into the post office and hand it to the postal worker in there, or into the drop slot in there, to ensure that your information isn't getting stolen. So now we're going to talk about a little bit about taking in payments. A lot of businesses don't take as many checks, but some do. And for a little business, that's a hard recovery. When you take a $7,000 check and it comes back, it could be very detrimental to you. So make sure when you're taking checks from customers, you know your customer. If you've got a new customer, you should be vetting them, calling some references, making sure they have a good pay history. Even calling the bank who issued the check before you provide the service or whatever, it's okay. Even if it's a bank money order, do that. Now keep in mind, you may call the bank, you may verify the check, they may say, oh yeah, they have the money in the account. That doesn't mean that it's held for you though. So keep in mind, you want to get that to it. For smaller businesses, sometimes I would suggest going to the bank that it was issued at. If Central Savings Bank wrote your business a check, then go to Central Savings Bank and cash that check. As long as you have the proper business paperwork, you know, you're a DBA, we could cash that for you rather than you tendering that through your bank, or at least check on it there. You could hold the products and services until the check clears. If you have any doubts, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you should, you know, you need to get paid. So, and don't use the funds from the check. If you have enough, you're gonna do it, you're gonna deposit it. Don't use those funds to buy supplies and stuff. Just let it sit there until it does clear before you utilize it. We're gonna move on to wire and ACHs. These are really popular forms for businesses because you're paying now. It's going into their account directly. There's no wait time. So this is a very common way, but it makes it one of the most popular ways for scammers. That's how they want to be paid. Because if you pay the wrong person, they can take it out of that account and you've authorized that payment. You're responsible for that. There's no way to get that back. So if it's a scam, you're basically out of the money. There is not a lot of way to get that back. We're often not successful in recovery that way. So making sure when you do payments this way, you know who you're sending the funds to, making that phone call, making sure if you got all your communication by email, you're verifying that email. Before we send a wire out, we are calling our customers personally and we're saying, did you receive this by email? If they say yes, we say, did you place a verifying call? If they say no, we strongly suggest you do it, because once that money hits the account, if it's a scam, it is gone quick. I mean, within minutes, they come and take the funds. So you really want to make sure you know who you're sending it to and verifying any digital communications. When calling for communication, don't use that same email they sent that bill through. Because if you do, you're just calling the scammer. And if you're calling the scammer, they're of course going to tell you to send it. When we talk about business identity theft, a lot of people look at it from the monetary loss. Of course, you know, places like the city, they're not gonna see business identity theft most of the time, but people will, you know, if people steal a business's identity theft, you're looking at, they can take out lines of credit in your name, and then you're responsible for that debt or for huge legal fees to try to stop that from being charged. And then the reputational loss is huge. Somebody's out there for a small business using your logos, using your name, telling they're going to provide this service, and then they take the money and they don't show up. Well, normally that website's gone, and then guess whose website they're using the number to call? It's you. You're the local person. So reputational risk of identity theft is huge. So if you're a smaller business or even a large business where your logos could be stolen, make sure you're checking those search engines, Googling your own name, checking for people who may be imposters using your name, and do it on a regular basis. Don't just do it once. So that way you know that you're safe from that. Talked about the fake invoices. I know LASCO covered a lot of this. They will send out fake invoices, so making sure that you know where they're coming from. They'll send them through the regular mail too, so if you're getting them through the mail, take a good look at them. Make sure that somebody really ordered that product. They count on us being busy. They count on us just grabbing whatever and taking care of it, because we are task oriented. We have to get those paid. So making sure we're looking at those invoices. We look back on old invoices, make sure they're not billing us multiple times for things. Getting approval on bills that need to be paid. You can, if you're in a huge organization where there's several departments, you can't be expected to know every service or every supply that somebody ordered. That's why you've got to partner with your other departments to make sure that they're approving those and signing those off. And then read the entire invoice. A lot of businesses, they're sending out invoices or things that look like invoices, and they're not even an invoice, it's a subscription. So when you sign it, you're signing up to pay so much a month for this service. And here you thought somebody ordered it, and then you're starting to be billed, and then it's like, how do I get this ACH to stop? You know, how do I stop paying them? How do I get out of this? So making sure you're reading everything before you pay it. Overpayment scams, we have actually seen this recently too. People become a customer and they ask for a service. This person happened to rent a venue from one of our customers. They rented a venue, they ordered all their services, and they were out of the country. And they also wanted a special band, which isn't unusual. And they said, we're gonna pay you with this credit card, and we want you to schedule, we're gonna overpay you, we want you to schedule that band. And this venue did that. Well, they weren't really renting the venue. The payment was fraudulent, and they paid $11,000 for this band to come in for this event, and there was no event to be had. So the recovery did happen for that one. So that was a good scenario for us, but how often would recovery happen in a situation like that? Because typically you wouldn't even know that was a scam until the day of the event when you set up everything and they just didn't show up. So, and the van, of course, didn't really exist. That's who you were paying. That's how the scammers got their money. The $11,000 went to them. So that's how the overpayment scam, and being careful of that. Anything overpaid. So just to conclude is, there's been scams for as long as I can remember. You know, I ran retail businesses for 20 years before this, and in the banks. There's always going to be scams. It's just being aware of that. As Lasco said, you know, be careful who you trust, not be too trusting. You know, there's a phrase, trust but verify. So make sure, just verify everything. It doesn't hurt, it does take time, but so does researching if you lost all this money and trying to get it back. Time consuming is when you send a wire and your proposed money doesn't go there and you're trying to get that money back. That's where the time comes in. Then, you know, 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there doesn't seem as crucial. So educating yourself and your employees, that's just essential. Making sure everybody's in the communication, having procedures written down so they're clear and people can ask questions, you know, not just, hey, we're gonna do this now, and somebody says it once and then it's not a procedure anymore. You know, it just doesn't happen as thoroughly. You gotta write them down, you gotta discuss them, get everybody's input, and then making sure that those are followed, having some type of internal control to test that. It's really, when you look at it, regular scams and cybersecurity scams, any type of scam, it's the same solution: education, communication, procedures, and, you know, following up. So I hope that helps some. I know it's late, everybody wants to go home, so is there any questions?
I just had a comment. When we can kind of depend on our departments and maybe get information out a little bit more, because the departments are approving a swath of invoices with every check run. And I'm sure, like me, you're not always looking at every single attachment or whatever. And having them, you know, just reminding them, hey, we are really counting on you. We're not, you know, we gotta work together.
Yeah.
For every check, every payment that's going out, you know, make sure it looks right, make sure it feels right.
Let them know they're the subject matter expert. You are the expert on this. I am not, you know, because there's no way you guys can know everything that's going on in a business this, you know, this size for this group here, you know. So just relying on those subject matter experts. This is important. This is what we need from you. I know it seems like busy work, but it's really not.
Legitimately have people initial them, whoever the subject matter expert is, saying I reviewed it, I'm authorized to do it.
Well, we have an electronic system.
You can get initials on your electronic system.
We do. Susan or Kristen isn't necessarily gonna know if something's not right. You know, it takes all of us working together.
And that's